Kia ora, ko Richard Templar aho. I'm the Chief Executive of Te Aorangaho Engineering New Zealand, and welcome to our election conversation series. With me is the Right Honourable Chris Hipkins from the Labour Party, and we're going to be discussing the Labour Party's views and ideas around engineering. We'll start with your 1-minute elevator pitch on what the Labour Party is going to do for engineering. Over to you.
Well, kia ora, thank you for having me. Labor wants to get New Zealand building again. That means we've got to restart the construction sector, after a pretty prolonged period of slowdown. We've got to get all of our tradies back to work. We've got to get our engineers back to work as well. And that means government playing its part in getting that part of the economy moving. So restarting some of the major projects that have been put on the back burner, providing more certainty in the pipeline of work that's coming so that people know what's coming and there isn't the same flip-flopping around priorities that there's been in the past, and actually implementing many of the really good recommendations that the Infrastructure Commission have put forward about how we can do things better in the future.
That's fantastic. Listen, you've talked about the Infrastructure Commission's infrastructure plan. What do you see as the most important recommendations in that plan?
There's some really, really good material in there. If I had to pick one out to elevate above all others, and it's perhaps one that's a bit boring, it's that we've got to get better at maintaining the stuff that we've already got, rather than always focusing on the shiny new things that people might want to build. Of course, we deserve shiny new things, and we actually need new things because we've got a population that's growing, we've got an infrastructure that's under pressure, and we do need new things. But we've got to maintain what we've got already. I got so frustrated as Minister of Education, for example, when I was having to replace school buildings, not because they couldn't have lasted the distance, but because they hadn't been maintained to last the distance. So let's maintain what we've got, and then we'll actually have more money to build the shiny new things rather than have to constantly be remediating stuff because we haven't maintained it properly.
One of the challenges to maintenance, particularly of large-scale infrastructure, is the increased occurrence of severe climate events and natural hazards. What is Labor going to do to make New Zealand more resilient to natural hazards and climate events?
I saw firsthand just how vulnerable we are. Not long after I became Prime Minister, literally I'd been in the job 2 days and we had the flooding in Auckland, and then a few weeks later we had Cyclone Gabrielle. And that really highlighted for me just how lacking in resilience we are, how vulnerable some of our communities are. The number of communities in New Zealand that have one old bridge that contains all of their major infrastructure, their telecommunications, their water, their sewage, their electricity, all going across one bridge. We've got to have a much better approach to identifying those risk areas and building more resilience and dealing with flood protection. So it means we need a proper framework for adaptation that includes some really tough conversations ahead about how we pay for all of that. How do we manage retreat over a period of time? I think people panic a little bit about that and think that it all has to be done immediately. If we're talking managed retreat, we're talking something that can happen over generations. It can happen over 40 or 50 years. We just need a blueprint and a plan. We need to get started, and then we can see over time that we can actually build a much more resilient country.
In terms of managed retreat, do you see that as something that is led from the centre or something that is a responsibility for local government?
I think there's a series of things. The centre certainly needs to make sure there's better data and better research available and publicly available as well, because let's be clear, some of these decisions are going to end up being quite contested. So making sure that we have a shared evidence base so we can all agree on some basic facts, some basic modelling, some basic projections. If people want to argue about those, they can, but let's get some good data out there and make it widely and publicly and freely available to people. I think the centre does need to do that. Central government needs to play a role there. And that will help to lead the conversation about where adaptation, where managed retreat is going to be needed. Other players have got a role in this too. The insurance sector, for example, very, very big player in these conversations. And then we do need to allow for local models around how to manage that. Just before we left office, I received the South Dunedin report that suggested here's a model that we could use to fund managed retreat in South Dunedin. I'm not saying that I would holus bolus sign up to that, but I was excited about what they'd come up with because I think it was creative thinking. It showed that over a 30, 40, 50 year period, you could do something big and bold without it being dramatic in the short term. And that's the sort of space that we've got to open up.
That's fantastic. I think one of the challenges facing the country is energy resilience. How do we get a more resilient energy infrastructure? How do we make energy more affordable? What's Labor's approach to energy?
We actually are a very lucky country when it comes to energy. We've got an abundance of it. So the question is, how do we harness that? And how do we make it reliable and secure? We have our energy needs here in New Zealand. We can be relatively energy independent and therefore much more energy secure if we make good decisions about how we harness that renewable energy resource that we've got at the moment. So by renewable, I'm talking hydro, wind, geothermal, solar. All of those options should be on the table. And it's going to require some more market shaping, because at the moment, the big companies can manufacture a scarcity in order to maximize dividends. It's actually a very rational commercial behavior. What they're doing at the moment is very rational from a commercial perspective. But it's one of the reasons why some more intervention's required, so that we're making sure we're using the assets that we've got to the best possible effect. Renewable energy should be one of New Zealand's competitive advantages in the world.
In terms of renewables, do you see a push from government for more electric vehicles and greater use of electricity in our transport system?
Absolutely. Electricity is the way of the future. I've done this transition myself. I wanted to do it so that I could see, exactly how the economics of it stacks up, where the pressure points were. So I put 24 solar panels on my roof. I've got an electric car, even, changed the lawnmower from a petrol lawnmower to an electric one. Went through that whole journey to identify how do you have a fossil fuel free house and potentially long-term a fossil fuel free life. There are some parts that it's really hard to do that. As a member of parliament, I fly everywhere all of the time. Yeah. That's quite a hard barrier to overcome in a country like New Zealand. We don't have the nice rapid high-speed trains and so on that you might have if you were in Europe. So we're still dependent on some areas of fossil fuels, but we can certainly reduce our fossil fuel footprint quite dramatically. Electric vehicles, the technology's there, the cost of it's coming down all the time. Household batteries and solar. It's not just the panels, it's also the batteries as well. Batteries can help to completely eliminate our peak demand problem if we get enough batteries into households across the country. So there's some exciting technology options now that even 10 years ago weren't even close to being at the point that they are now. So, you look at what they've done in Australia, 800,000 batteries installed in about 7 months. It shows that you can do things at scale. If the will is there and the commitment's there, you can do it.
That's great. In terms of one of the big consumers of energy in New Zealand is our manufacturing sector. Our manufacturing sector needs help to improve its productivity and its performance and its scale and innovation. What is Labor going to do for manufacturing?
I think dealing with the energy crisis that we've got at the moment is clearly a major priority when it comes to saving manufacturing, and also not just manufacturing, but things like food processing. We're seeing an exodus of food processors from New Zealand, and we're a primary producing country. We can't afford to have that. If we're looking at our resilience and our security as a country, losing our capacity to process timber, losing our capacity to process food, losing our capacity to produce, pulp and paper and so on, we can't afford that. So we've got to do more in the energy space so that we can shore up that base. But we've also got to double down on innovation. New Zealand should be not just doing what we've always done, but we should be at the forefront of, innovative new manufacturing opportunities. Decarbonising the economy doesn't mean deindustrialisation. In fact, if we do it well, it means the opposite to that. It means opening up a whole range of new opportunities to do things that could potentially create new export markets for us. That means that we can be leading the world in a whole range of areas. So make sure that we catch up. We pride ourselves in being innovative. We run the risk of falling behind if we don't really, pick up our game when it comes to R&D investment, when it comes to renewable energy. These are opportunities for New Zealand that we can't afford to waste.
Absolutely. Well, Right Honourable Chris Hipkins, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you coming here and sharing Labor's approach to engineering and what it's going to do for the country. If you've enjoyed this conversation and enjoyed this video, we invite you to join us for our great infrastructure debate on August the 6th. I will be there, and so will be the Right Honourable Chris Hipkins. Thank you very much.